you know. Right. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the NIBOSH National Journal Certificate, the May class anyway. And we are on the cutting edge of the NIBOSH project. So I guess I'd probably entitle this video Project Theory or something. Right. Let's go straight into it because I want to finish the theory and I may want us to start part one of it today. Right. And I'll talk about those parts in a bit. So we did this last week, but this was the end of last week, probably from about 2 o'clock. We changed into this. So I'll just recap it a bit and we can take it from here, right? So the objectives of this session, this is 3.4 in your textbook if you have it. If you have your book, I have mine here. And so you want to get to 3.4, right? So we have the learning outcomes here is the legal requirement for doing a risk assessment. You can actually find that right on page, it's actually on page 25, the very first page, but I think it's a bit lower down as well. It's on page 29 as well. You see their legal requirement. Didn't really ask that because it's too easy, you know. It's going to come up on the slide, right? We're going to look at the aim and objective of a risk assessment, identifying hazards, risk assessors, and the composition of a risk assessment team. We didn't do that last week. Criteria for suitable and sufficient. We didn't do that last week. I skipped that slide, right? So the revision, how can a safety culture be improved? Anybody want to have a go at that? How could you improve safety culture? There were really just two ways, well, two categories of doing that. What are the two main ways of improving safety culture?
Well, I was here last week, but two that come to mind, leading by example and communication.
Okay, very good. That would work. That would work. But for somebody who was here last week, right? Like, I mean, so there's no shortage of answers for that. There's like training, leading by example, support. But according to the textbook, right, or the theory, there are two ways to improve culture. Because culture is made up of two main things. So then what is those two ways to improve culture? Or if you could figure, so what is culture, or what is culture made up of? Who contributes to culture?
Managers and the employees.
Right. So the two ways to improve culture is they improve managers and they improve the employees, right? Remember, that's the whole idea about consultation and the thing with verbal, written, and graphic wasn't really about verbal, written, and graphic. It was to tell you that that's the way the managers could communicate with the employees to get them to do the right thing, right? That was revision anyway. Well, not today because I already have the project to show you what it looks like today. But maybe we could come back and start doing some passive. But the reason is that well, I have said it, like when you reach 3.4, that's like halfway. Well, you know you're halfway, and it's probably more than halfway. You know how you know it's more than halfway through the course? Because chapter 4 is only 2 sessions long. But chapter 4 would be September, because remember the whole of next week and the other week, it's project, right? So chapter 4 will be September anyway. And October is your, October is your exam schedule anyway. Of course, that's not a bad thing. I would say that's a good thing because so many people want to hold the qualification. Look, when I had two other class before you all today, right? But one of them was the degree class. So I probably put back the results on the other table, right? But one of the classes we had got results. Sorry for the interruption anyway, but just an announcement. So I had 19 persons pass the NIBOSH National General Certificate to tell you how people holding the qualification, right? So 19 persons. One of the students got 81. I think that's an overall high score. That is what you call a distinction, right? So the certificates sometimes come, but not sometimes come, but the, the certificates have pass, credit, and distinction. I haven't had a distinction at the certificate for some time now. I've had for the diploma this year already. I had somebody in the diploma that got a distinction, right? That was a Darren in the diploma, but I haven't had a distinction in the certificate level for the years yet, right? I had somebody that got 81. So when we say exams coming up, that's not a bad thing because you want to get the qualification, the world is asking for it. I've told you that many times. Check up, trinidadjobs.com or one of those job sites. Guyana, I've been there, I've seen it for myself, right? England, the Middle East, South Africa, India, Canada. The world is asking for it, right? So it's about time that you get it too. Right now, we would be finished by September. We'll actually finish about 3 weeks in September, right? Just letting you know that you'll have like a free week in September. The exam will be the first week in October anyway, right? So it's not long again. If you check it then, it's like August, September, and really September is ready for chapter 4, which is just about 2 sessions long anyway, right? Anyway, let's have a go at this. So that's good news. So those of us, like I said, you want to move on with your career and stuff, right? So we did this last week. I'll just recap it. So the legal requirement I told you is page 29. Regulations 3 of the Management of Health and Safety Drug Regulation 1999 requires a suitable and sufficient risk assessment to be carried out. It is implied under Section 2.3 of the HSW Act 1974. So that's legal requirement. I mean, this, like, if you don't know what that means that is the law for doing a risk assessment in the UK, right? So when they say legal requirement, that's like how we would say, well, what is the law for doing a risk assessment, right? So the answer is the law for doing a risk assessment is Regulations 3 of the Management of Health and Safety Drug Regulation 1999. It says to do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. If you go back to the start of the book, you would see they have the definition for what is a hazard. We have done this 2 times already now. A hazard is the potential to cause harm, can include articles, substances, plant or machines, methods of work, and the working environment and other aspect of work organization. Risk is the likelihood of that hazard coming to life. That's a nice way of saying it, right? Like risk is the likelihood of the harm occurring. You see the harm, what you there, is the hazard. But the likelihood of the hazard coming into reality is what we call the risk, right? And they calculate that with a formula, likelihood times severity. We have touched this before where they use numbers 1 to 5. If you want, we can have a look at it again, right? We'll have a look at it again today, right? So what is a risk assessment? It's the process of calculating the risk. It's the process of deciding on what's the likelihood, what's the severity, and you're multiplying the two numbers, right? So the process of identifying preventative and protective measures by evaluating the risk from the formula I just showed you, arising from the hazard, taking into account the adequacy of any existing controls, and deciding whether or not the risk is acceptable. Most of the times when you do the first risk assessment, the risk is not acceptable. You have to put further controls in place. You see existing here, but when you decide it's not acceptable, then you put further controls in place, right? So what's the objective? The book page 29 has the purpose of a risk assessment. What's the objective of a risk? None of this is exam, is it, right? To determine the measures required by the organization to comply with relevant health and safety legislation, to ensure the risk is acceptable, to fulfill a moral duty of care to employees, to prevent workplace accidents, to reduce the direct and indirect costs associated with an accident. Okay, so this one needs some explanation. I left this last week because this needs some explanation. So let's see if we can find it in the book. It's not a hard explanation, but it needs some explanation. So page 30, if you have your textbook. So if you notice the law, and of course, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Grenada, Jamaica, right? The law says the same thing, right? If you go back and you read it, let's go back and read it. the law actually said Regulations 3 of the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulation 1999 requires a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. So if you look at page 30 and you look at the slide here, it seemed to be that like they didn't just say do a risk assessment, right? If you read the statement, you can check it in your book too. It actually said do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. So the question is, what's the difference? What's the difference between a risk assessment and a suitable and sufficient risk assessment? So that's why this have its own heading. And if you check your book page 30, you're going to see they have its own heading, suitable and sufficient risk assessment. Right? So the law, I'll say that again, the law did not say do a risk assessment. It said do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. So let me explain it, and then we'll check it out on the slide and check it out on the book, right? So if you want to go take a little bit of notes as I explain, it's a simple explanation, right? But you'll have to take it up, right? Tell me when you're ready, if anybody writing and stuff. Exam-wise, June 2021 is when this question came, right? So who didn't listen in class? People that see this as a hard question, by the way, I'm not too sure why. Simple explanation, right? But the reason why like, of course, I tend to remember my students. So I have a student. She went on to do the degree, but when she sat the exam was June 2021, and this was the question that came that everybody was stumped and didn't know what was what. Of course, if you go back and listen to the video, which some of them may have done, because I think like I had used her paper as a model paper, and she probably did the same thing. She went back and listened to the video, and then she got what it meant and whatever have you, right? So she's in a degree, right? Doing really well. A lot of companies, know about her, right? And when she came here, she wasn't working in safety. She was actually in sales, right? Like during the pandemic, 2021 was during the pandemic, people were home and whatever have you, right? Anyway, so that's what I remember. The question, June 2021. I don't think I've seen it since. It may have come once after that, right? But it was the same questions. It wasn't like another question. To say that it left an impression on me then like it was another question. No, it was the same question that they brought back from 2021, right? So suitable and sufficient is not a trending topic. We talk about NIBOSH have some trending topics like moral, legal, financial, safety culture is always going to be there. Management is always, doesn't matter when you're sitting, management is going to be there. Accident investigation or accidents are going to be there too. So you have some certain go-to topics now, right? Safety policy and management systems kind of common, but nothing as common as moral, legal, financial, and safety culture and management commitment. Those are the go-to topics anyway. Suitable and sufficient, not trending, but a lot of people don't like it for some strange reason. The phrase itself is confusing to them. It's not confusing at all. So listen back the video, right? When I save this video, I'll probably call this video, I'll call it on YouTube suitable and sufficient. So it'll be easy for you to find it. Plus I put it on a group chat anyway, so it can't be that hard to find, right? Listen to the explanation, right? So what does suitable and sufficient mean? Listen to it. So suitable and sufficient means what you have to do when you're doing a risk assessment, you have to tailor it to the person that you're doing it for. That's what suitable and sufficient means. You can take that out. That's what it means. Suitable and sufficient means that you are tailoring. Let me go forward and I'll show you what. You're tailoring the risk assessment. Watch the heading to different people. You see, a risk assessment for a man cannot work for an expectant mother. So the law didn't say do a risk assessment and everybody is everybody and everybody is all workers. No, people are different. From time to time, we may fall within one of these categories. Young, well, we probably all fell within that, right? But I guess if you come out of the young category, eventually you'll fall in the old category soon, or the elderly category, right? Then you may be classified as based on what happens to you as a worker with a different ability. Disability is nothing that, there are people that are born like that, right? But a different ability could just be something that happens to you in the course of your working life. You may have had a back injury. I've seen workers that lose fingers, right? I've seen people that have, you get in an accident, you walk with a limp. These are not things that you are born with, right? But you cannot see it. So the law is saying you cannot just do a risk assessment and assume that it's good for everybody, right? So listen to the words, suitable. So when you do a risk assessment, it must be suitable for a young person. It must be suitable for a pregnant woman. It must be suitable for someone with a disability. So that's the meaning of suitable and sufficient, right? So before we get into, you know, they don't really bring the textbook thing, right? You don't really bring how you see it in the book, right? But like what they will ask you for exam, they will ask you like comment on if the risk assessment was suitable and sufficient, right? Now, when you read the case study, if the case study said it was a young worker, and then the case study mentioned they have not updated the risk assessment in the last 10 years, but then that's it. You don't need this slide because you understand that the risk assessment should have been suitable for that young person. And if the case study said when it wasn't updated in the last 10 years, but then it's not suitable at all. Think you understand that, folks? So that's why I say the explanation is easy. The theory may make it look hard, but because you do an open book exam is always easier, right? If the case study mentioned like a worker was injured and returned to work and was on crutches. And again, they said that there have been no formal assessment. But then again, you can say, in my opinion, the risk assessment is not suitable because the injured employee is on crutches and no record, no update was done to that risk assessment. So if you understand it, because that is your exam. I'll go to the theory here now, but it don't really come like these words there, right? It comes more like you understand it. The law said do a suitable risk assessment. Suitable means you're tailoring it to the worker there. You're tailoring it to Frank, who is an elderly worker who have visual problems. You're tailoring it to Jane, who told you that she was expected, right? So she's pregnant. You're tailoring it to Henry, who is a young employee you all took it into a training program. That's what the case studies is happening, right? And if you're not seeing that in the case study, what then you're saying, in your opinion, the risk assessment is not suitable and sufficient. Tell me if you understand it a bit. I'll run through the kind of theory here with you, but the theory words, you can use the theory words, and I can show you how to use about 3 or 4 of this today, right now, in fact, right? So a good thing to do is to base it on your case study, but when you run out of answers, you could come back to the theory here and see what suitable and sufficient meant. Tell me though, if you understand the bigger picture, like the bigger picture is when the law say do a risk assessment, one risk assessment can't work for everybody because people are different, right? Who knows if you have a medical problem? Who knows if like person was born like that? Who knows if, it's a new medical condition? The company should not discriminate, right? We have laws against discrimination. So they can't discriminate on your medical status and whatever have you. So if you learn then that you have some condition, a skin condition, but you're working in a dusty environment, you have to let them know that. And then they have to put that in their risk assessment now that this worker, has been tested and has revealed that they have sensitization dermatitis. Sensitization dermatitis is just a little bit of dust will cause it to break out, right? I saw it with a worker, right? And so, or the worker says he or she has, trying to think of something. I mean, and no illness is nice. So I wouldn't try to call on anything. I'll just go with sensitization dermatitis, right? Which is something simple anyway, but of course irritating in that sense, but not fatal, right? So the risk assessment you have for the everyday worker that cannot work for the person with sensitization dermatitis, or for the nursing mom, or for the pregnant employee, or for the person that has a disability, right? Do you all understand that? Yeah. Let me know. Let me know. You could unmute the mics, let me know. And then we could look at it on theory. So the theory, but you see, the theory is not the past paper. That's the straight. Like you can't use these words. You have to use what you see in the past paper. The past paper said, the young employee, 17 years old, joined the company. But then later on, you said, not you, I mean, the case study said, um, no records of the risk assessment were found. You have to use that. You can't use what you're seeing here because that's the thing with NIBOSH, it's based on the case study now and not the theory. But I could twist some of these words and I can make these words fit into pregnant employee and disabled. I could make these words fit like that, right? And that's what you may have to do. The question, from what I remember, was not a lot of marks. I could have been 5 marks, right? Just give me a minute. I'm expecting a call from one of my past students, as I mentioned there. Yeah. Okay, Stephen. Bye. Bye. Yeah. Yeah, I'll let you hear the last part of it because that is Stephen I've been talking about. Have you ever been talking about a guy called Stephen? Stephen was working in a McDonald's and well, Gulfview there now, right? I don't know if I told that story before. Today, that was, by the way, that was 2021. Stephen and the girl I mentioned was in the same class, right? But today, Stephen is a big boy in the companies, right? Stephen is coming to sign up for the oil and gas qualification. And when he came here today, when I said he was working McDonald's, he wasn't working in the cashier, he was in the back cleaning chicken. Today, Stephen is, a big guy in the company. He told me he just finished a turnaround. He was spearheading the whole turnaround. That was 2021. To tell you how NIBOSH could change your life, right? So that's why I put on the things so that you would hear when I say he was actually coming in to sign up for the oil and gas today, right? I told him come help us to after our class. All right, let's move on. So hopefully I'll be hearing about you all in the future, Nicholas and Crystal and Derek. Because everybody is everybody. That same class that he was in, the girl I'm talking about, her name is Kerry, and two of them was in the same class, and two of them work in safety today, right? Well known in the companies. If anybody knows Stephen, I just call him first name, I won't call his last name, right? But well known in the companies, and even before him, he's just one that called the phone now, right? But I'm talking about somebody who's leading a turnaround in a company, meaning like, that's how I get work for you all as well. And that's how I got work for him. At first, he was so green, nobody wanted him, but look how his life has changed. I actually know because of the class, I got to know his father, right? And like they were not on the wealthy side. Everybody sort of trying to work, and he's in a good position to help his parents now, right? And I know working one of those shutdown, he actually purchased a car. He actually made an accident with it, but he didn't write off the car, right? But to tell you how, again, long and short of this is that NIBOSH could change your life for the good, for the good. And this is just Trinidad. What about those who just leave and go Qatar and come back here millionaires and stuff? Told those stories before, right? All right, let's take a look at the theory, right? So the theory suggests that to be suitable and sufficient, you must identify all foreseeable risks. Let me read all of them out for you. You must identify all foreseeable risks. The level of detail in a risk assessment should be proportionate to the risk, meaning if it's like high risk, you need a very detailed risk assessment. You need to record all significant findings. The level of risk should determine the degree of sophistication of your risk assessment. Employers and self-employed should use appropriate information sources to help them identify risk. The risk assessment should be appropriate to the nature of the work and should identify the period of time for which it is to remain valid. So I could use three of this. Let me show you which three. I could use three of this, but we're gonna have to imagine a question though, right? Remember today we're not focusing too much on that. So if to be suitable and sufficient, the notes suggest you should identify all foreseeable risk, right? What I'm saying is that when you read a case study, if it's said then like it had an accident, oil was on the ground or water was on the ground or a machine was defective, then you could say, you could use this theory then and say, well, in my opinion, the risk assessment may not have been suitable and sufficient because it did not identify all foreseeable risks. You understand how to use this slide? Right? Let me do another one. Like this one here, like this one, okay. Should identify the period of time for which is to remain valid. If the participa says the risk assessment is 10 years old, and by law it should be updated every year, well, then you could say, in my opinion, that risk assessment is not suitable nor sufficient because a risk assessment should be updated yearly. It should remain valid for a period of time. So this is tying in the notes. But, as mentioned in the case study, the risk assessment has not been updated in the last 10 years. So you could use piece of these notes, like, and even some of them like this one, the level of detail should be proportionate. But what I was trying to get at, right? What I was trying to get at is that if you understand the thing, I mean, fine, and there are people who could understand it to that level. There's people who have to come back to the notes, right? But if you understand it to the level, like what it means, and I was saying a risk assessment being suitable and sufficient means it must be tailored to the employee. So if you read the case study and you get the idea that this risk assessment is not tailored to the employee disability or ability, right? Remember, things like pregnancy is not a disability. Pregnancy is an ability, right? So if the risk assessment is not tailored to that ability or that different need, well, then it's not suitable, nor is it sufficient, right? Tell me if you're okay, that is done. It wasn't a lot of marks. I do have a past paper, but that was for a class from this morning, right? So I prefer not going to haven't discussed what the question have been like. Because today was ready to get on the project, right? So, and then even if I open that past paper, because we said suitable and sufficient is not a trending topic per se, it has come twice. But there's no real big emphasis on it, and having discussed it, the only thing is if you all have any questions, if you have any questions, tell me if you understand what the suitable and sufficient is. Suitable and sufficient is really judging if what they have in the case study is good enough. And if it's not good enough to cater for the needs of the employee, well, then it's not suitable and sufficient. The words kind of sell it out. Suitable and sufficient. Good enough. Have you done enough? And if it's not done enough, well, then it's not suitable and sufficient. Tell me what you think. If not, I'll just move on back to the normal risk assessment, right? Yeah, the folks in Guyana, though, Keishal, the oil and gas is not, sorry, is not for you all, right? The present arrangement, yeah. So my thing, I'll have to approach NEBOSH with another agreement with that anyway, right? But at the moment, the current arrangement is just for Trinidad and Tobago. If it is for any Guyanese, you would have to fly to Trinidad to write the exam, right? That's the only way the exam is going to be here anyway, right? We do have an oil and gas in Guyana, but that's like a local oil and gas to Shadrach Safety Institute. If anyone in Guyana wants to get it done, though, you're going to have to fly to Trinidad. Not for the classes, but you have to fly to Trinidad to get the exam done, right? All right, so just to continue some theory, risk assessments can be qualitative in which words are used, such as high, medium, low. It can be quantitative using a simple risk matrix or detailed calculation that will be covered more in the NEBOSH diploma. By the way, the NEBOSH diploma, starts twice for the year and it's filled, right? It's filled for this year. Our next intake is September, but it's filled already. So we have no seats on the NEBOSH diploma available at the moment, right? But February next year, there will be probably about 10 seats may open up, if so much anyway, for the NEBOSH diploma, right? Most risk assessments are semi-quantitative, in which a combination of words and numbers are used. We see we have some here. So risk assessors must be competent. Who is a risk assessor? You are when you pass an NEBOSH diploma, right? So, well, certificate. So risk assessors must be competent, must be skilled, must be experienced in both practical and theoretical knowledge. Risk assessment is not be done via a team. Teams can include anybody and everybody from your company who is qualified, right? HSE manager, supervisor. You can read that out. That's not too much of a question, right? Example of a risk calculation. If you want to turn your page, when you turn your pages a little bit to page 35, 34, 35, 34, right? 35. Now, this theory is needed for your project. That's why we're doing it, right? In fact, if you don't get this correct, you don't pass your project. I'm admitting some students as we speak, right? Just give me half a minute again. Or you could just listen and it's up to you. So that page have a timeout thing on it. That probably timeout already.
No, I submitted and I continue.
Uh-huh.
Click submission. I continue and I see like it come back, but I didn't see no email or anything.
Did it say successful?
Wasn't saying anything right now.
You had the arrow mark continue in the corner there?
Yeah. In the end, yeah.
Uh-huh, you click it?
Yeah, I click it.
Hmm.
And I usually when it's successful,
It's supposed to see mark successful on the screen.
it wasn't seeing anything on the screen.
Yeah, I'll have to check after class. Yeah. All right. So if you look at page 34, they have like the risk matrix. Those of us who may have done that before, the risk matrix is like the numbers associated with a risk assessment. The ones in your book is very good. They have I probably just use the one in your book, right? But I'm just trying to line it up here anyway, with what the matrix is anyway, right? So number one, in the book, extremely unlikely for likelihood to 5, which is very probable. Then for severity, they have 1 very minor injury. Then you have 5 disabling injury. And then they have the risk matrix. For those of us who remember it, you multiply your numbers and the higher numbers you get is red. Red means you have to stop the job. You can check it out on page 35. And when you get the risk assessment as high, you have to introduce controls. As I see here, introduce controls. When you introduce the controls, you work over the risk again. That's called residual risk, right? So I can have one here, like example, electric kettle overheating. This is just like an office risk assessment, right? Likelihood by severity is the formula. Likelihood is 5, severity is 4. 5 by 4 is 20. So if we check where 24 is on the risk matrix, 24 is in the red, right? 20 is red, so that means you have to stop the job. And when you stop the job, you don't stop the job to have people, upset, even though they might be upset, right? But 20 is unacceptable. So you stop the job and you put controls in place. This is an electric kettle. This is boiling hot water, right? This is, this is boiling water to make tea, right? So the controls could be regular maintenance of the kettle. There is something in England called PAT testing. PAT stands for, it's not an exam question, so it really matter if you write it down or not. But as you're learning, like you may want to write it down. PAT stands for, you get you? Yeah, man, you get you.
No, there was no problem. It was just saying, okay.
That's something on the card here. So PAT stands for portable appliance testing. Portable appliance testing. That's like a testing scheme in the UK, right? But it's law in England though that all electrical equipment and stuff must be tested. Frequent inspection based on use. So when you do these controls, the kettle should have been in a better order. The problem was the electric kettle overheating due to the failure of the thermostat. So if it's regularly inspected and stuff, I mean, that shouldn't really happen. So instead of 5, it goes down to 2. Instead of 4, it goes down to 3. This is what I said is the residual risk, right? 2 by 3 is 6. 6 is not perfect, but 6 is better than 20. And we say, well, that's adequate. We look to improve at the next review, right? Let me see if I have another one. Look, I have another one here. Let me try to bring it up on a bigger view. So, we have the activity manual handling. The hazards identified as pinch points, cuts, trapping. This is who could be harmed. We have people in the vicinity, existing controls, proper supervision, permit to work. The likelihood of manual handling injuries, though, I have it as 4 here. If you have anything, just to mention it to the class, just unmute your mic and let me know, all right? As I'm teaching, I wouldn't check on the chats if you'll put anything there as yet. So likelihood is 4. Sorry, 5. The severity is 4. 5 by 4 is 20. Again, 20 is in the red, and so you have to put further controls in place. When you put the further controls in place, I have regular monitoring, but of course it could be much more detailed. This is just a PowerPoint, right? So regular monitoring, I would have dropped the numbers down. Instead of 5, I went to 3. Instead of 4, I went to 2. 3 by 2 is 6. 6, of course, is not perfect either. I mean, you can look at it and see that. 6 is not green. Green is kind of better, but 6 is yellow. But at least it's out of the red now. If it's out of the red, the work could continue, right? I have here another activity, clean out the battery charger panel. Identification of hazards. We have electric shock, who can be harmed, people in the vicinity. Existing control, permit to work on lockout and tag out. So this is relatively low. If you lockout and tag out, for those who don't know what that means, right? Lockout and tag out. Today's Saturday, that reminds me, Lotto. But lockout and tag out, right? I think it's 7 million right now. For those of us who don't know. The Lotto now I'm talking about, right? Anyway, lockout and tag out, right? Like if you know what that means, it means isolate. So that's why I have the numbers here low now, right? Because lockout and tag out means if you isolate, it means you turn off the power. So if you turn off the power, people cannot really get shocked. So I put number 2. I say if somebody probably still get shocked, it'll be 4. 2 by 4 is 8. 8 is kind of good. 8 is not in the red. But then you can do further control still. I have disconnect the cables from the battery. So if you do that, then there's no way you can get shocked. So I went down to the lowest of lows, which is 1 by 1, which is 1. Right? You can't get 0 in this formula because the numbers start from 1. So 1 by 1 will give you 1. Right? You can't get 0. You could only get 1 by 1. That's the lowest, right? So if you disconnect and you isolate, the only way you get in shock is if a lightning strike you or something, right? But, so that's why I went 1 by 1 with 1 here, right? So what you're looking at, I was telling you all, well, I didn't get to all of this last week, but I was telling you all, if you could remember, and if you can't, it's on the recording, that the steps then that you saw, if you go back here, these steps are in your book. These steps are under suitable and sufficient. If you go back to that page 30, the same 5 steps are there, right? The 5 steps are risk assessment is there. Identify the hazard, identify the people who might be harmed, evaluate the risk, record, review. So what I was trying to tell you, well, last week, first of all, I was telling you, if you are staying in safety, I want you to learn these steps for you. Forget the exam. Well, I mean, don't forget the exam, but forget it in the sense, because it's an open book exam. So for the open book, you could open the book and look at the steps. But if you're in safety, then this is what safeties do as well. Right? So we host meetings, we collect KPIs, but as a safety, you do risk assessment. So you wouldn't want to say you're from Shadrach Safety Institute and you don't know the steps in a risk assessment. If that's the case, just telling me from another school, right? But once you know the steps in the risk, it's not hard. I think last week I gave you an acronym. At the end of the class, I think I had given a wrong letter. Somebody stayed back after the class last week and they told me, I think I gave it 2 E's, and that was because I was remembering we have other NEBOSH courses, right? There's like another level to this. And they have the acronym is 2 E's, but the thing about an acronym is an acronym. An acronym is just a way to remember the longer thing now. So just learn the proper thing, right? Identify the hazard, decide who might be harmed and how, evaluate the risk, record and review. But there's another NEBOSH course that they have evaluate and estimate. But this is not that one. So that's why last week, I don't know if you want to correct your acronym from last week. I don't know if anybody was wrong when that was said. But I think after the class, somebody said, but after was it 2 E's? And then I realized, oh, it's level 3. So in level 3, we just say evaluate. But in fact, it's actually estimate and evaluate. But you're not learning it like that. You learn what you see in level 3. So you're learning the way you're seeing it. Right? I just saying it have estimate and evaluate. But for now, evaluate, right? So if you want to check your acronym from last week, but an acronym, as I said, is an acronym. An acronym is not set in stone. An acronym is just like a fun way of remembering something, right? So take out one of the E's until you reach that level and learn it the way you see it, right? Identify the hazard, evaluate the risk, record and review. And like for me saying it, because we learn it how we learn it, I'm still, like we learning it, like how we learn it, and like we learn it to say the full thing then, which is like how it is said at the diploma level. But for now, you just learn it as evaluate the risk. And forget the acronym. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Forget the acronym. Learn the thing by heart, identify the hazard. And if you wonder why? Because there's an open book exam. It's because of this. It's because of this, right? I was telling you all, the steps of the risk assessment and is head into your project. And we're going to look at that now. The steps to the risk assessment that you see on page 30, if you have your book, is like the heading on the risk assessment. So the first thing in the risk assessment heading, I'll show you just now, right? Is like the hazard. Identify the hazard. The next thing is like who could be harmed and how, right? So in a way, even though it's an open book exam, in the real world and in for your NEBOSH assessment project, the steps become the heading of the table. So it's best you learn it anyway. And it'll be so good to know the steps in the risk assessment, right? As I say in this, I hope you don't come to the door. But that same guy, Stephen, I remember I'd set up an interview for him. Long story short, and they asked him that question and he didn't know. He didn't know, he didn't, and that's why since then I tell students learn the steps, right? And he didn't get a job, and maybe that is for the good anyway. Some things do work out. Your life will work out the way God wants it anyway, right? And the person that I had organized the interview for was another past student of mine who was working in that company. He still is at that company. He has actually taken on another one of my students that actually got through the interview recently this year, right? And before him was another student too, right? He had another student of mine. That guy left, and the manager of this company took another student of mine that is actually the safety there today, like right now, because I know that student working today. Yeah, they call him to work out. They call him today to work. So he wasn't in class today. Right. Anyway, the manager had called me and said, how is it that people coming out of the NEBOSH certificate and they don't know the steps? And Stephen had actually said to the person, it is an open book exam. And he told them if he needed to know the step, he would have just used the book anyway. And that's actually true for the real world. I mean, in the real world, nobody really testing it. You could actually open the book and see the steps. But perhaps it is best to learn it because he actually lost that job. But he working much better, much happier now. I guess what is for you is for you anyway, right? So do we want to ask any questions? And because I'm finished, I'm gonna try to introduce the project now, and we at least want to get into part 1, and I want to show you part 2. Part 1 is very easy. Actually, part 1 has nothing too much to do with what we just said here. Part 1 is like the introduction, so it isn't, like the table itself as yet. tell me when you're ready. See if you have any questions on what we said today. So we kind of covered the 5 steps. Very big today. We covered suitable and sufficient. And that is meant for pregnant employees. You can have a read of this. They don't really test. This is just theory. They don't really test the theory, right? Nursing moms, young persons who may be inexperienced, right? Something beyond their physical ability. You could have a read through of this, right? But as I said, the past papers are not asking you what constitutes a young person. They would just say comment on if the risk assessment was suitable or sufficient. So once you realize they said it at a 17-year-old there, well then it should have been tailored to them, but it probably wasn't, and then you can actually go on to say that, right? Any questions, anyone? We have 17 silent persons on. All right,
So in your example with the kettle, right? You had the likelihood of the overheating at 5. Is it that the kettle was overheating from before or was a normal kettle?
To be honest, I just made up that figure for the class. I mean, I
Okay,
didn't really
because
think any.
it
I don't think it's a real situation anyway.
understood.
Yeah,
Okay.
because likelihood of overheating, that meant it. Well, I suppose if the thing did failure of the thermostat. But no, I didn't really put thought into this. It was just like an example to show you that the first risk number now does be high, and then when you number high, you put more controls in place, and the numbers go down a bit. So
Okay,
it
okay.
wasn't really it wasn't real, and it was just numbers on a slide anyway, right?
I get you.
Okay, anybody else? Thanks for the feedback there. Derek, it's good to hear somebody else. I did tell you I'm battling what seemed to be a sort of dry cough. Not too bad though, but what makes it bad is that the uh the talking now, like today, like yesterday I was dreading talking 3 classes today, right? All right, so there's some things I want to tell you, but I'm trying to figure out where to tell it. I need some space to write. So I guess I could write on this slide, right? So if you want to get a beginner's perspective back to the project, so that's what I can do today. So next week when we come, we hit the ground running then, right? Now we're gonna hit the ground running just now too, but not with the table itself. We're gonna hit the ground running with the introduction, right? So if you want, just take a couple of pointers down here. I'll try to keep it down to about 3 or 4, and then we'll start the introduction. But I need to say some things there before. In fact, I'll probably go to 5 if I could think of 5. I could actually only think of 3, but I put in 5 here anyway, right? Okay, so the first thing is this. So to pass the NIBOS certificate, you must pass the open book exam, and you must pass this project as well, right? So to be awarded a certificate, you must pass the open book exam, and you must pass the risk assessment project as well. We refer to it as the project or the project or the risk assessment, but it's properly called NG2, right? Most people call it the project, which actually is not, but the proper name is NG2, right? So some of this would have been said on orientation day, but orientation was in May, but you all have it on your phone. Thank God for that. You have the orientation, May orientation on your phone. You can go back and check it out, right? So here's some things that are kind of weird, right? And remember, again, how I would say it is like, like we didn't, this course is not from Trinidad and whatever, right? So we kind of have to do what they tell us now, right? So the project, and please come in at any time, unmute your mic and let me know. And give me a chance to kind of take a 30-second rest with my voice, right? But the project does not have a pass mark. I may have mentioned that in the orientation, it doesn't have a pass mark. So then how do you know when you pass, right? So what it have in it have like a checklist. The project is like a checklist. I'll show you now, right? I can show you now. I can show you now when I say now, like now, now, now. So let me just change the view here. But if you could write for me here, the project is like a checklist. Let's finish up this one and I'll show you it, right? So what that means is that there is like a left-hand side to the project and there's a right-hand side. And you pass the project when you meet everything on the left-hand side. It's simpler than you think, believe it or not. It's simpler than you think, but it still is challenging. Please remember that. I always said to you all that NIBOSH is not easy, but it's not hard either. Right? We have tried to use some acronyms to describe NIBOSH. I'm sure you'll remember me say some of them. If I say them again, you'll remember. NIBOSH is like the world of wrestling. Half of it is real and half of it is not real. Right? Yeah, but it still is entertaining, right? So NIBOSH is like that. It's like, it's not easy, but not hard. But if you do what you're supposed to do, you can feel. But it's not really hard, but it's not really easy either. It's somewhere in between there, right? Let me show it as we talk, right? So let me just change the marker here. So could you all take that down? So if anybody asks what's the pass mark, it do have a pass mark, right? When you meet everything on the left-hand side, you pass. If you leave out something, you wouldn't pass, right? Let me try to show it. You can tell me when the screen change, right? See if it changes. You're supposed to see Risk Assessment Unit NG2. Are you all seeing that? Yeah? Okay. So after the class today, I would forward you this because like I said, I didn't really... Today's not really the project in it. Today's like the introduction, right? So what should I mean by left hand and right hand? So this is one that has been filled out and I'm going to send you this one. Yeah, we could give you a sample, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? So so the one I send you, there'll be a blank, I'll send you this one and I'll send you a blank sheet. Next week, if you want, I'll recap some of this, but I ain't going back to this nitty-gritty approach, right? I'll just start teaching, right? But next week, if you want, you could come with your blank, like photocopy your blank sheet in the Zoom, and like you could fill it out one time now. Like when we put name of the organization, so the accent for this and the blank sheet, this would be blank, right? So when they say name of organization, you are putting the name of the organization. That's how simple it is. If you leave it out, you'll fail because it's a checklist approach. You put site location, you put the site location. The number of workers, you put the number of workers. General description, well, I'll tell you this now. I'll try to go through one with you today, right? I'll try to do this piece today because this is the easy piece. The table coming up. What table? The table you just saw. Look the table here. The table that I was trying to show you. The steps in it. Step 1 in your textbook, identify the hazard. Page 13. Step 2, who might be harmed and how? Step 3, what are your present controls? What are your further controls? And here they have time scale and responsible person. But you have to do this 10 times, 10 to 12 times. So the table does take some time to follow. Right? So as I say, we could probably do the introduction today. Let's kind of go back up to the introduction. It's not easy, but it's not hard. What it is, though, is time consuming. That's probably what it is, right? Here they have description of the area to be included. You put the description of the area. Any other relevant information? Well, there is a guide to this. That's the first document I was reading. Look, that one is here. Let me just pull this one back for you. This is called the guide or the guidance. Look at their guidance. This actually tells you what they want. Like if you reach that point, if you come down here to the guidance, when you reach any other information, you'll see what they ask you for. Watch it here. Any other relevant information, what they really wanted to know there is who has the day-to-day responsibility for health and safety. So if you come back here now, any other relevant information is supposed to say who has direct responsibility for health and safety. See how easy it is? It's easy because you just have to follow the guide then. It's like following ways. The way to pass is to just follow what the guidance say, right? So any other relevant information, we have the finance director who reports directly to the managing director, has direct responsibility for health and safety. And if you do this, your business fix, right? And if you do this, and what I do, that's what I'm trying to tell you, next week, now we starting this one today because I'm watching the time when we have time, right? We'll probably start it. But I would have walked you through now. For those who know me, I walk you through all of this. So if you come with your sheet, you could fill it out one time, right? However, next week we'd only get to finish the table. There is a part 3, so that's the other week, that's the 24th. I'll walk you through part 3 and part 4. Right? If you come with your notebook, you come with your paper, we could just do it one time. Right? But in every class, people don't do what I ask them to do. In every class, somebody leaves it for last. But, everybody is different. Right? I wanna change this, right? I want to get a space. I should get some space to finish my numbers. Okay, so I guess I could write this space here. Or should I go back to the guidance? Let me go back to the guidance. So let me finish up what I was writing here, right? So the open book exam, right? To be awarded the NIBOS certificate, you must pass the open book exam and the project, as we call it. The project is a checklist approach. You just saw what that is. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any burning questions? Both are sent to the UK. However, you'll have to email us your project, right? So the project is, I don't know if you want to write it down, please write it down in your own words. The project is email when you finish to Shadrach Safety. At the moment, NIBOS platform doesn't take it, but they give us the link, right? So we have a link when you email us the project. You email in your project to Shadrach Safety Institute, and then we have to do some conversions with it, and we have to put it up on the NIBOS platform, right? So when we say projects are due now, your project could be due the last Wednesday in September. It's always the Wednesday before the exam. The exam is October. So your project is due the last Wednesday in September. I'm not too sure what day it is, but you can take a note of that down. However, the good news here is that we look at a draft. So as I was saying, when you write your draft, we do look at your draft. We do not really do it for you, but we'll tell you, like, for example, if I go back, which I'm not going back to, but you know what I looked at? Like if somebody did the introduction and they left out something with, the description, I would tell them, well, you need to put this in here. Now, we don't put it for you because there are some people who are hardened. Yeah, Trinidadians are kind of hardened, right? There are some people that are hardened. And like we would say, put a shift. Consider if there's a shift system, or if there be shift work ever in your company. And the person would say, well, I have no shift. And they will send it to us, and we send it to NIBOS because, time to send it will come. Then you would fail, and then NIBOS will say, well, you should have put a shift. So then they have to pay more money and rewrite it. And we told it to put the shift in the first place, right? So I say some people are hardened, and then there are some people that like when I email you this, I email you this guidance you're looking at. I email you this sample and I email you the blank. There are some people that don't go back and look at the sample or the guidance. Yeah, there are some people that don't. So like they would fail, and then I would say, well, did you look at the guidance? Did you look at the sample? And then they say, what sample? What guidance? Right? So everybody is different, but I said that once you work, you're supposed to pass. Right? What again am I leaving out here from the basics of this, right? So we look at your draft, we give you a feedback. Once it's early enough, you can't come beyond the deadline though, because remember, you have to send it to the UK. Trying to see, plagiarism. So try to avoid working in groups if possible. NIBOS is very good with the plagiarism thing and copying. And do not also copy from the sample, right? So plagiarism is like, like you're using stuff from the sample, right? So like, well, I guess I'll tell you a story because sometimes the stories kind of make the thing more real anyway, right? So, there are some students that work together trying to get the market to change, and it's not changing, right? So like, there are some people that, like I had a student in Guyana. I actually presented the certificate to him when he had to do it over though, but I actually was there in Guyana last year, November. I actually saw him this year too. I actually see him on the road. Where I stayed, he was working in a company ministry, I think, right in front there. Uh, Stop and I talked to him, and yeah, we are good. But the thing is, the year he was writing, he plagiarized, right? So what he do, right? What he do, he take the same template and he just take out some stuff from it now. So like hazardous substance does, he leave that. Hazardous system does, substance sorry does. High concentration of process does. That's copying. That's copying, right? Certain places he put back the same thing. Consider RP if the above do not fully control the hazard 6 months. No, you cannot copy, right? So NIBOSH has a plagiarism software. They are very committed to it. They also have a plagiarism team, right? And I told him that his name was Jeffrey. Well, is Jeffrey, right? I told him, when he sent in his draft, I told him, I think your project is too similar to the sample that they send. I told him, read it over and change up the words. Like you could change this in your own words. If you say use face mask in conjunction with dust extraction or extraction, you can just read that 3 times and say it back in your own words. You can say, well, at XYZ, workers should be provided with face masks. You could research face masks a bit of the correct type. And like well, not extraction, but a local exhaust ventilation system. You could say it back in your own words, right? So that's my opinion. I told him, but he ignored me. Shadrach, I don't know what he doing, sending the project. And of course, NIBOSH caught him in plagiarism. He had to do it over. Like I said, in November when I was there, I carried the certificate for him because he did it over. But then why do all of that when you could just do like what I tell you to do, right? So so do you all understand that? So do not, I mean, people who work honestly, you all have no issue with plagiarism. But if you're trying a smart shot, another one, people try to doctor this template for some strange reason. Like another one is this one here. You see this set of reference here? But we wouldn't reach this today. See this reference? I don't know why people like to put the same thing back. This is just one example of a guidance. I think I taught you all how to find a guidance on the HSC site. People come back with that same line. I started looking up reference to good practices relating to organization. The HSC website had lots of resources. Right. But why are you sending it back the same way? And they come and they copy this whole thing there. This one too doesn't get copied. I also checked the accident book to see what types of incidents had occurred over the last 12 months. Right. Nobody's saying you can't use it. But why are you sending it back the same way? They will catch you for plagiarism and then you waste your money. Well, you had to spend more money and you had to come back and do the thing over, right? So nothing is wrong with reading it and changing it, right? But something is wrong with reading it and leaving it, right? And so just remember they have an extensive plagiarism software that picks up, similarities then. And once they catch you, they catch you. Yeah, right? I actually have some on my desk here, but I can't show you that. When I say some, I have the letters that NIBOSH sent me saying that certain persons are caught in plagiarism. I can't show you that though, but the fact that I have the letters on my desk means to you that it has happened to some people. The thing is just work by yourself. And if you want to use a line, change it. Like this line, right? I started by looking up references to good practices relating to our organization. You can say that in your own words. I could say it. Anybody could say how they can say that in their own words? How can you change that line to say it back in your own words? Have a go at it, because it's after 2 o'clock. And I'll drink some club soda in the meantime. How do you change it? I started looking up references to good practices relating to our organization. Somebody change that for me. Right. So remember the class is dependent on you, right? I good as
So,
they would say.
I think I remember putting So I looked up on the HSC website guidance, and I changed mine.
Right. Anybody can change it. I think I could say it like I could say that by saying something like I researched information relating to my company by looking at Google, comma, the Health and Safety Executive website, and other UK sites, something like that. And you can say it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But the problem is when you start saying the same thing, this one I tell you, there's got a lot of repeats. Like I also checked the accident book. Now that's where the draft comes in. But like I tell you, remember, we don't want change nobody drafting it. All I could tell you is that look, I think your draft have you should not say that line. And then there's some people try to hide it. They hide it up all here. They say, oh, this table here, I tell you, they would hide something here. But remember, it's a plagiarism software. So if I miss it, the plagiarism software not going to miss it. Somebody could take this here. Look at the possibility of setting up health and safety surveillance program for all affected workers. So I could miss that. But the plagiarism software not going to miss it, right? Anyway, I did mention in a good note, 19 persons out of a small class of 20, about 20 something, 22 persons passed the NEBOSH exam for June. It means that people doing the right thing. But there's always somebody not doing the right thing, right? Just make sure that person is not you, please, right? Let's go into, oh, sorry, I have some more things to tell you about the project. Yeah, like I said, today is like the run-up to the project, right? So listen to this. So please keep on writing. So are you all writing? Are you all writing? Are you all writing? Anything down? Because next week I'm going to go through this introductory piece of it, right? So the project is roughly about 10 hazards you have to get. 10 to 12 hazards. Please take a note, 10 to 12 hazards on the table. Ideally, these hazards should be different hazards. So I should probably make a note of that, 10 to 12 different hazards. There are some people that don't understand what the word different mean. So I'll go ahead to tell you that. So 10 to 12 different hazards mean that if you use noise in number one, don't use it again. Right? That's what different mean. If you use hazardous substance, don't use it again. Forget what the sample have. The sample is just a sample. The sample didn't go for marks. Right? I will show you this, the guidance that we have it in. See, if I pause to show you everything now, then I kind of lose and focus on all the things I wanted to say now. But oh, sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing there. Yeah, I don't want to stop to show you every single thing, but this is the guidance, right? If you read the guidance, it actually tell you, you know. But I tell you, some people don't like to read and think, right? Look at there, right? So you would need to complete a risk assessment for your organization. You must find and record 10 what? 10 different hazards, right? So just for the sake of those who are not too sure what the word different means, as I was saying, like if you use noise, don't use noise again. If you use it in number one, don't put back a next one on noise. If you use slips and trips, don't put back another slips and trips. 10 different hazards. Now, as I tell you, the project doesn't have a pass mark, but it's a checklist approach. So if you have 9 hazards, if they check and you had 10, but you had less than the number that they want because you repeat some of them, right? So it ended up that you already do have 9, or sorry, that you don't have 10 categories, but you have 9 categories, you'll fail. Because they ask you for 10 different hazards. Right? There's a technicality to that. I don't want to go too much in that because today is the first day. To make it simple, just make sure if you use noise for number 1, number 2, slip, trips, and fall, number 3, electricity, number 4, movement of people, number 5, hazard. Just make everyone different and you're safe. And you're safe. You have nothing to worry about. You have nothing to worry about if you do it like that. 10 different hazards, right? All right, number 7. So if somebody put 11 hazards, you do not get more marks than somebody that put 10 hazards. 10 is a good cutoff point. But like I said, there are some people that go on to put 11 or 12 or whatever. That's okay. Right? Yeah, we really don't get any more marks, but it's just good planning anyway, right? All right, next thing here, your project can be done from home. You really don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere. Now, next week, I'll tell you, please remember this. When I start next week, I start, I am coming back to talk about, somebody asking the question, so do I need permission to go to a company? The answer is no. You could do the project from home, right? The project could be totally made up. You don't have to even go Atlantic LNG or go Mass. You could just make up a company. It could be totally made up. You could call it Maslin and Sons. Lex R3. You could just call a company that same thing, Lex R3 Company Limited. Right? Well, I know Nihil have a company, working for a company already. Right? Crystal Mohan, Robert, Nicholas, Nadine Mohammed, Aidan, Kimberly Joseph, Kimberly Jacob, Keshal, Christy, Vishala. You don't have to go anywhere. You can just use your name. VH Constructions. Nobody coming to check and see. The project could be made up, right? And I'll tell you why it could be made up. Well, other than it could be made up, I can tell you why. You see, the purpose in going to a company was to get the 10 hazards, right? Correct, folks? The purpose in going to a company was to get the hazards, right? Yeah? Yes or no? Well, like where the hazards coming from? Coming from the company, right? So the purpose in going to a company was to get the hazards. Actually, that's not true. NIBOSH actually give you the hazards. I want you to take a note of that. They actually give you the hazards. NIBOSH actually give you the hazards. Yeah, so you really don't need to go anywhere. They give you the hazards. NIBOSH gives the hazards. If you wonder what I'm talking about, so they giving you the 10? Yes, they're giving you the 10. NIBOSH is giving you the hazards. So easy. Just some people, we call it easy hard because some people don't understand how easy it is. NIBOSH gives, well, I was going to put given, but it comes gives, right? So NIBOSH gives the hazard. Again, I repeat myself. What do you mean? Do they give you the 10 hazards? Yes, they're giving you the 10 hazards. Right? NIBOSH giving you the 10 hazard. So you mean I don't have to go to see slips and trips and fall? No, you don't have to because they give it. NIBOSH giving you the hazards, right? I refer to it as the hazard pool, but that's my way of talking about it, right? I refer to it as the hazard pool. They give you a pool of hazards to choose from. So from that pool, you just have to choose your 10. You don't really need to go Atlantic LNG to see somebody falling from height or work at height. But there's no falling from height, right? But, like work at height then. Because they give you a list of hazards. It's in the same document, your guidance to learners. I refer to it as the hazard pool. Now, here the trick is your hazards must come from the pool. Remember, I tell you what this project is. It's like a checklist. If they tell you use the pool, which I call the pool, you have to use the pool. You cannot take a hazard from out of the list there. Tell me if you're understanding so far. The project is easier than you think. It's a checklist. You get a sample, you get the guidance. They tell you take 10 or 12 hazards, but you don't really have to go nowhere because they give you the pool already. So why you going for anyway to see noise if noise is in the pool? It means you could use noise. Right? So the hazard, the project is just done from home. You can make up a company name. You can use Atlantic if you want. Nobody saying no. You can use Demas or wherever. Nobody saying no. But you don't have to put in Demas there or put in New Iron there or put in Proman there or Gisby in Guyana there. Doesn't give you another mark than somebody that put Lex R3 Company Limited. It's the same mark you're getting. The point is it wasn't about that because the point was just filling out the checklist. Right? Let me just show you the pool first and I'll go back to the checklist approach, right? And then I'll probably come to 9 and 10 and I figure after that we could stop. Like I didn't really get to start it because this is all the introduction to the project. This is all the things you need to know to get the project done. It must be typed up, of course. I'll probably leave that for number 10. But let's take a look at the pool, right? So when you look at the guidance, see, I think I have to change my marker. Yeah, Zoom doesn't run like that, right? So, right. So when you come to the guidance to the learner here, look, so look the pool there, right? Look, they say it here, right? Is anybody writing? I can probably clean something here, but I may have wanted it to review. Watch it here, right? You must find and record at least 10 different hazards. If you come down here, can you all see that, or is it writing on the screen? So can you tell me if anybody is writing? Because you all are not saying anything. Anybody writing? Anybody not writing? You all sleeping? You're daydreaming? Anybody writing so I could clear part of the screen?
I was working, sir.
Picture of the screen.
We can
So,
clear it,
I
yeah?
don't know.
You can clear it, yeah.
Okay, all right. But you all are seeing the screen, right? You're seeing this kind of document in the background, hazard category.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, we
sir.
see.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'll leave. But just remember, we reach number 9, right? I'll put 9 and 10. I would like to leave it to recap all, but hopefully I have it written down, right? Anyway, so we'll kind of work with that. All right. So what would it say here, right? So if it is okay, you're thinking, well, so what did Shadrach say? Why? But look at here. For the avoidance of doubt, right? You know why they say that? Because they know you're doubting yourself, right? Hazard category for this assignment or the topic headings for element 5 to 11 of the NG syllabus as shown in table 1. We see here, this is table 1. So this is what I tell you. They give you the pool. I refer to this as the pool. When the pool have more than 10, because this is one here. Noise is a hazard. See, you have to check yourself and tell yourself, so would I have noise at my company, the made-up company? Vibration is a hazard. Radiation is a hazard. You only want 10 enough. Mental ill health is a hazard. Violence at work is a hazard. Substance abuse is a hazard. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 on this row alone. Work-related upper limb disorders, ergonomics, that's a hazard. Workstation design, that's a hazard. Manual handling and load handling equipment. So you just picking 10 from here. For the avoidance of doubt, hazard categories for this assessment are what you see on table 1, right? Hazardous substance could be chemical or biological. So you can get 2 here. Yes, you can put hazardous substance chemical, and then you can put hazardous substance biological. That's 2 separate hazards because you have that subcategory here. So that's not 1, that's actually 2. Health, welfare, and working environment, that's a hazard. Work at height is a hazard. Confined space, you get the idea, right? Work equipment and machinery, fire and electricity. That's way more than 10. You only need 10. So when you make up your company, you say, Shadrach Roti Shop. Yeah, people have done roti shop, curry shops all over the world, right? I actually didn't know that. Have you ever had tandoori chicken? Everybody having tandoori chicken? Yeah. You know, tandoori chicken was actually invented in London. I didn't even know that. I didn't know. I think that was invented in London. Yeah. I didn't even know that. I learned that, right? Anyway, so if you have, like a roti shop, I heard people use roti shops, garages, UTC, those of us in Trinidad, we know that one, banking, hospitals, garages, if I didn't say that as yet. The weirdest ones I think I had was like bakery and roti shops. It really don't matter where it is. So you could say S&R roti shop, but you're thinking, okay, like, so that's the heading of, so that's the name of your project. Let me just go here a bit and show you. I have to change the marker, right? So you come here. This is back to the template. So when you come up here, name of organization, S&R Roti Shop, it don't matter if it's real or it's not real. Where is it located? Santa Flora, South Trinidad. Number of workers, 5. This project is not hard, but it's not easy because you have to do it, right? If you fail to do it, you'll fail. And if you fail to do it good, you'll still fail, right? Is there somebody on the outside? Somebody can bump out. Keegan. You have a Keegan in this class? I wonder if what if he's in the other class? If you have any questions, please ask while I waste some time here, of course. Yes, I actually have a Keegan in this class. Oh, Keegan, no comment at that. Yeah, okay. You probably got bumped out, right? So what I was saying now, so like the name don't really matter. And when you go to pick your 10, and we go back to the thing here, when you go to pick your 10, you want to pick your 10 that relevant to you. So like if it's a roti shop, you could probably take something like slips and trips based on maybe dust, flour, and oil and stuff in the ground. You could take something like, work at height probably wouldn't be applicable to you. You can probably take fire, electricity. You could probably take radiation from the ovens. You can probably take manual handling from unpacking bags of flour and oil. You can probably take mental health issues. Hopefully not. I guess roti shop workers should be happy. But you can never tell if they're working under stress or whatever have you. Workstation design. You might want to take health, welfare, and the working environment, right? You understand that, folks? So then you pick your 10. Somebody in a machine shop, if you're using welding, it's going to be different. Again, you can call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it, let me see who name to pick here. You can call it, okay, so I have Sparkle Lynch, I have Aaron. So you could call it, Lynch, welding and fabrication. It don't really matter. But when you reach to your hazard, then you choose the hazards that are kind of consistent with a welding shop. So it may be noise, it may be vibration, it may be fire, again, it may be electricity, work equipment and machinery. You go through hazardous substance, yes, chemical. It mightn't have biological. It may have slips and trips. It may have loan working. It may have work at height. If it's a machine shop, stuff being stored at height. And that's what I tell you, they give you the pool. And as I tell you, folks, you understand that they don't really have to go into Massey or go into Exxon. You can do this from your memory because they give you the hazards, right? If somebody was using the hospital or a private medical facility, a nursing home or something, you pick those hazards again, you can give it your own name. You call it Mohan Nursing Home, right? Or MNH, Mohan Nursing Home, right? MNH care or whatever, care and concern. And you pick your hazard, right? For the nursing home, well, it may be mental health issues, it may be violence at work, it may be substance abuse at work, it may be hazardous substance now, biological, it may be health. So you picking it. Tell me if you have any questions, folks. I can't really make it easier than this. And you can't really get easier than this too, because this level of spoon feeding is not what is expected at the tertiary level anyway. Do you know how this project is done worldwide? Do you know that they just give you these guidance and they tell you go and do it? And you know what's interesting? People actually pass. You know what's interesting here? After all of this, people actually fail. That's interesting, huh? People around the world, NIBOSH, just the other providers give you this guidance, they give you this, and they tell you go and do it. And people pass. Right in Trinidad here, there was another school, right? And the girl passed. She came to do the degree. And I said, but how did you get the project done? Because for those of us who know that school, the person passed away in the pandemic. I said, how did you get the project done? I said, fine, the teacher gave us the guidance and the sample and we went and we got it done and they passed. Here, I was so shocked. I said, but look, I just give my students 2 classes on this spoon feeding and people still failing, right? But I guess it's all for you, right, folks? We're gonna stop here. I would love to hear any questions you have. So I'm gonna send you this now. You're on my last class, right? I'm gonna catch my breath a bit. I'm gonna email you this now. Look at the register in my hand. I'm gonna email you this guidance, this sample, and I email in a blank form, right? If anyone is trigger happy and you want to give it a try, I would advise don't try the whole thing. But because you're typing, you could try, if you're trying the table, just try one row, like one hazard now, right? I have lots of YouTube videos. If you all have subscribed to the channel, I think we close to 1,000 subscriptions. If anybody have not, please subscribe. You can look at the video during the week and have many videos on YouTube that I have on this. And, you know, like if you do that, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but I think you are going to be proactive. And if there's anything you have to change next week, because next week, look, I'm starting back here next week, you know. You just have to fill out our name of organization. Hopefully you think of one. It don't really matter if you don't think of one, you can just use your letters, your name or something, right? We walking you through this next week and I'm walking you through part of the table next week, right? By that time, the class will be finished. And then the other week, we walking through part 3 and part 4, right? So I've told you that before, many people, you know, go on to pass. You'll have no reason to fail unless if, you know, you're doing your own thing still, right? Then, you know, then you'll have to kind of learn the hard way, which NIBOSH is very happy to help you learn anyway, right? But we should do it the right way, especially I tell you, like we look at the drafts, we, you know, we go out of our way here to look at a draft, right? And give you a feedback. But we don't do it for you. Like, I mean, like I said, if somebody look at your shift, right? I had a student. So when I tell you these things are somebody, they leave out the shift. And we mentioned it to them, you know, you need to put a shift system. And then they said, well, my company doesn't have a shift. It doesn't matter because the project is a checklist. So like if they ask you for a shift, you have to put the shift. How do we know they ask for the shift? Watch the guidance here. You all don't need me now. All you need is this guidance here. Watch it here. In the description, right? Watch it here. You need to put the types of, let me start at the top, a general description of the organization, which must include information on products manufactured and or the services provided, the types of activities undertaken, and the shift patterns work. It didn't say or, it would say or shift patterns work, but it didn't say or, it say and. So when we tell you put the shift pattern, we're not trying to be difficult, I'm trying to make you pass, right? But I'm not going to take my 2 fingers or 4 fingers and type in for you a shift system. No, I'm going to tell you, look, you leave out the shift, right? And the whole project is like that. The whole project, we could tell you like what you're looking for, but we're not, if I tell you 1 time put the shift, 2 time put the shift, and you put it, well, I submit it to NIBOSH. There's a day coming when we have to submit, right? But if you do what we tell you to do, and you use this guidance, well, you don't even need me. But for those of us who don't like to read, and you want to go through that back and forth with the draft itself, you know, the guidance tell you every single thing. And look, this is something on the table. People just forget this here. This is column 4. Look, they have mark it there, column 4. Remember, you must take account of the hierarchy of control. That means you must put the word eliminate, substitute. You know, the thing is, NIBOSH say remember, and people just forget. There's a reason why they say remember, because they know you're going to forget. But then we tell you to put it, and you still don't put it. Right? Project is easy, hard. Just remember that. Right, folks? We're going to stop here. Do you have any questions? So next week, I would advise you to probably, I don't know if you want to hard write it or if you have your laptop one time and we could try to fill out some of this one time now. So when the class finish, you finish part 1. You know, if you want to go back and neaten it up, that's you. But we type in. When I calling it out, like how I say Shadrach Roti Shop, you put a name of your organization there. How I say Santa Flora, you put the name of a location there. When I say 5 workers, you put the number of workers there. You're finishing this next week. The only reason you're finishing it is if you just sit down there watching, right? Come with the thing to type, comment if you want to hard write it, but photocopy the blank I'm gonna send you now. And let's get this out of the way, right? We want to say good passes, as how we say, but as I always tell you all, like when some of you have asked, what is the pass rate at the school? The 19 people that pass in June is not you. So don't piggyback on them. In fact, don't piggyback on anybody, stand up on your own 2 foot, right? Or feet. So we could say 19 people pass, but that don't mean 19 of you will pass. Right? So it had no such thing as whenever somebody asks me the history of the school, I just say nothing. I say we have no history. It is really dependent on you. If I tell you somebody get a distinction, that don't mean you will get a distinction. And if I say somebody get 13, that doesn't mean you will get 13. Everybody is different. Right? I'm done. I'm done. Please consider the oil and gas. As I said, it's a limited sort of course anyway.